Dr. S. Balasubramanian.
Good morning, sir. As you all know, respiratory conditions form a major chunk of the pediatric practice as far as we pediatricians are concerned. It forms the bread and butter. The organisms can be very protein, right from bacterial to through viruses to mycoplasma and so many others. And the clinical spectrum also can be very wide, from walking pneumonia to a very severe necrotizing pneumonia, which can be occasionally fatal as well. And in the initial choice of antimicrobials can be very crucial as well. To talk about all this, we have Dr. Balasubramanian, an excellent DNB teacher. I have heard him talk in one of the Nagpur conference. I think he was on respiratory medicine itself. Dr. Balasubramanian.
Very good morning to all of you. I'm very happy to be here at Manjari, and I'm thankful to Dr. Joshi and his team for welcoming me today. Community-acquired pneumonia is a common problem. What am I going to discuss today? I thought I will share with you a few cases from my personal file. Why am I sharing it? There are some dilemmas in these cases in decision making, particularly with regard to identifying the organism and also how to give antibiotics for these children. And incidentally, we had done some work on invasive pneumococcal disease. I thought we would share the information to you. And finally, I will also talk about pneumonia and pediatricians with respect to relevant antibiotic usage, with summary of the future of diagnosis of pneumonia. Let us get on with a very common problem. This is a 4-year-old child who has fever for a day, 103 fever, and the child is spiking, and you have cough, tachypnea, and retractions. Total count is 22,000. An X-ray is taken, and this is what you find in the X-ray. A shadow there in the left mid-zone, suggesting alveolar consolidation. The question comes to us, what is the bug? What you see here, all of us know, is that it is a round pneumonia, isn't it? It's very obvious that the whole thing is a round pneumonia. The moment you see a round pneumonia, the question that is asked, which bug is the commonest one? All of us know a round pneumonia is most often, if you see a round pneumonia, 90 to 95% is likely to be pneumococcus. This is more often seen in children 8 to 12 years of age. But not all round pneumonias are pneumococcal. Why? In fact, we ourselves have seen one fungal pneumonia causing a round pneumonia shadow. The shadow did not disappear, child did not improve. It could be a lung abscess, it could be tuberculosis, it could be pulmonary malformation, congenital malformation. So all that is round is not pneumococcus. Or it could be a space-occupying lesion. So whenever you see a shadow like this, you should also think of something rare like a diaphragmatic hernia. We have had one case very similar to that. So when you have a child like this who has a pneumonia, the question that is uppermost in your mind, what test do I do? You look at that list of tests I have put here. Blood culture. Many people would say blood culture is useless in pneumonia. Let us see the data. Because the yield is very low. But most of the small labs don't grow. Even salmonella, less than 10% yield you get in blood culture. So why waste money? That's the question. Second, diagnosis of mycoplasma pneumonia. You have IgM, IgG, ELISA. Is it useful? Let us look at the data. Next is you are working in a state-of-the-art center. PCR for respiratory secretions is available. You have sputum, you have nasopharyngeal aspirate, you have throat swab, you have nasal swab, and you have a test which costs you 20,000 rupees. Are you going to do it? Next, state-of-the-art. Now they are identifying pneumococcus blood PCR. Technique is available. But is that good enough? Or if you have a pleural fluid, if you have pleural effusion, you can use it intelligently. You can send it for a pneumococcal antigen test, which costs hardly 500 rupees. If it is positive, it confirms pneumococcal pneumonia. Last, urinary antigen test. Let us take one by one. Blood culture we should perform, even though the yield is low. Mycoplasma, I'll talk about it later. PCR is expensive. Blood PCR is not available even for me. Pleural fluid is available in Chennai. It costs only 250 rupees. We do it routinely whenever we have empyema. Urinary antigen, there is a word of caution. If you do urinary antigen test in children below 5 years, it can be falsely positive. The reason is a normal child may be a carrier of pneumococcus and it may intermittently excrete pneumococcus in the urine. So urinary antigen test is very useful. If I have pneumonia, if my urinary antigen is positive, I have pneumococcal pneumonia. But that's not the case with children below 5 years. Above 5 years, it could indicate that it is pneumococcal pneumonia. The next question is, are you able to identify these bugs? That is a question. 15 years back when we talked about pneumococcal vaccine, everybody asked, where is pneumococcus? Now things have changed. This is one of our own studies where we publish in Lancet Infectious Diseases as part of a project on ACIP and BASIS, a multicentric study containing data from 15 centers. What did we get? What did we get? One thing is that this is the largest surveillance effort for pneumococcal disease in India so far. And we got a very high yield of positive blood culture to the tune of 14%. In fact, in our center, it was around 16 to 18%. 16 to 18% of our suspected invasive pneumococcal disease, we got a yield of blood culture. And we found that any invasive bacterial disease, the commonest organism in India, south, west, north, central, it is pneumococcus. Fortunately, we also observed multi-drug resistance to penicillin is very, very low. It still continues to remain 9%, though the meningeal strains, the resistance is high. Pneumonia strains, the resistance is very low. That's why they are all getting away with ampicillin, amoxicillin, or penicillin. Most important thing, is the vaccine going to be effective for community-acquired pneumonia due to pneumococcus? Surprising to know, 74% of the strains which are there in Indian children so far are covered by PCV13 and 68%, which is good, with PCV10. Then the next question that comes to your mind, when you have a round pneumonia, what antibiotic you choose? In fact, if I put it to word, there will be 100 opinions about the antibiotic dose, duration, as well as the way it is put. Are you going to use amoxicillin, amoxiclav, ceftriaxone? Somebody in government hospital, if penicillin is available, may be using penicillin or ampicillin. I'm sure in Kerala it is being used. In Chennai, we don't have ampicillin very easily available. We use amoxicillin. The next question is, should we add azithromycin or not? That is a dilemma we have. The WHO says the best drug for community-acquired pneumonia, outpatient as well as inpatient, non-severe or severe, oral or parenteral, is amoxicillin. The WHO recommends 80 mg per kg based on Pakistan's Bhuta studies. But in India, the resistance to penicillin is very low. The MICs continue to be low. We can get away with 40 milligram per kg of amoxicillin. And those who are working in hospitals may use ampicillin step down to amoxicillin oral. And I'm surprised that even in Mumbai, amoxicillin injections are not widely available. They use ceftriaxone or amoxiclav instead of amoxicillin, but there is no need to use it. You can use amoxicillin injection if it is available. The dilemmas one faces in such situations, we tend to use ceftriaxone left and right. But somebody in Mumbai told me, one friend of mine, sir, amoxicillin injection is not available. We don't want to use amoxiclav, so we use ceftriaxone. It's a problem. You need not use ceftriaxone left and right. The WHO recommends it only for severe pneumonia. Second is amoxiclav. Once you see a round pneumonia, 9 out of 10 pediatricians I know will straight away use amoxiclav, not take chance rather than use amoxicillin. But you must understand, most of the pneumococcus does not require clavulanic acid. You can get away with amoxicillin. But there are a few situations a pediatrician can judiciously start amoxiclav straight away. When do you do that? If you have a child who has had H1N1 or who's recovering from H1N1, you can always consider giving amoxiclav because there is a high risk of Staph aureus infection following H1N1. Studies have shown. Second, if you have an aspiration pneumonia, if you have an anaerobe as a cause for pneumonia, amoxiclav is good enough. In fact, adult studies have shown it is better to use piperacillin tazobactam for aspiration pneumonia. There is no pediatric data. So the message is, if you have round pneumonia like this, ampicillin, amoxicillin, or penicillin should work in 90 to 95% of the cases. Amoxiclav should be considered if there is aspiration or recent H1N1. Ceftriaxone routinely for non-severe pneumonia is not required. Let us get on with case 2. This is a 2-year-old child who had fever, cough, respiratory distress. The whole family and the neighborhood have fever and cough. You know, everybody is having cough, everybody is having fever. These days, H1N1 season, and you do an X-ray like this, and you find increased vascularity, you find dirty lungs both sides. You know the diagnosis. Is it bacterial or viral? Obviously viral. The question is, if you look at the studies on etiology of pneumonia, only 1/3 of pneumonias are truly bacterial, 1/3. But world over, even Indian data has shown that viral pneumonias are more common than bacterial pneumonia, unfortunately. 1/3 is viral, 1/3 is bacterial, 1/3 is a combination of virus and bacteria, or a combination of atypical and bacteria, or a combination of virus and bacteria. So that's what literature says. So most of the time in empirical treatment, whenever anybody follows the WHO regimen of fever, tachypnea treated as pneumonia, you're going to treat all viral respiratory infections with antibiotic. Is that rational? The next question is, will you be able to distinguish a viral pneumonia and a bacterial pneumonia? It's $1 million question. You require astute clinical stewardship for that. Look at this slide, which is from Lancet. If you have these features, child younger than 5 years, everybody is having cough and cold, running nose is there, wheezing is there, cough is prominent, total count is normal, CRP if you do less than 20, procalcitonin is emerged in a big way, less than 0.2, 0.1, X-ray, dirty lungs, no alveolar consolidation, and you give antibiotic, nothing is happening, child continues to have respiratory distress, wheeze, is obviously viral. On the other hand, you have an older child or a very young infant, rapid onset, alveolar consolidation, total count over 25,000 or 15,000, CRP over 60, lobar alveolar infiltration, it is bacterial. In fact, I came across in the net a scoring system. I'm not going to bore you with the data. It's a very simple thing which we often do. We ask our fellows to do this, and we find it very useful using all the criteria to distinguish viral and bacterial. We must attempt, though many a time we do empirically give antibiotics to most who have cough, tachypnea with or without retractions. But when you have viral pneumonia, the next question when there is community-acquired pneumonia, should we give oseltamivir or not? If you look at the data, the WHO has removed oseltamivir from the list of essential drugs. BMJ last year questioned the very role of Roche in promoting oseltamivir in the studies. So it's under a cloud. But to prevent medico-legal issues, if you don't give oseltamivir for a child who is in category B or C, the lawyer and the judge is going to find fault. So epidemiologically, if you have category B, severe symptom, flu-like symptom, viral pneumonia, it is rational to give oseltamivir, and studies have shown if you give within 24 hours, it prevents otitis media, it prevents the duration, reduces the duration of illness by at least 28 hours. But the message is, if you want to give oseltamivir, you should start within the first 48 hours of illness, not after 7 days of pneumonia. Case number 3. This is a 10-year-old child who had fever, rash, and came with bloodshot eyes like that with bulbar conjunctivitis. There was respiratory distress. The child had wheeze, had some erythema of the skin, was toxic. Of course, in a severe pneumonia, we always tend to use amoxiclav and also azithromycin or ceftriaxone and azithromycin. The question is, we did mycoplasma IgM, it was positive. Can we call this atypical pneumonia? All of us know the term atypical pneumonia means it behaves differently from pneumococcal pneumonia. How does it behave differently? One, it doesn't cause lobar consolidation, it doesn't cause empyema, it doesn't cause toxemia, it's a walking pneumonia. But in reality, it is not so. All mycoplasma pneumonia need not be walking pneumonia. It can be severe, it can be in ICU also. In fact, in a recent paper in the Lancet Infectious Diseases, the author had commented that the very term atypical pneumonia should become obsolete. The reason is, all the atypical pneumonias, your chlamydia, mycoplasma, may behave like pneumococcal pneumonia, and with the advent of modern technology, you will be able to identify the etiology in every typical and atypical pneumonia. So the author says, you should not be using the term atypical pneumonia. You should be only calling it as proven mycoplasma pneumonia, proven chlamydia pneumonia, proven Legionella pneumonia. But then, the question for a pediatrician like me, when there is a pneumonia or an atypical pneumonia like this, for me, the most important thing is to treat. My question is, should I give azithromycin or not? You look at the data. Cochrane Review 2015, azithromycin is useless. Useless. WHO, azithromycin is only for pertussis trachoma, not for pneumonia. But look at the other guidelines. IDSA, it says any severe pneumonia above 3 years, if the clinician suspects atypical pneumonia, you should add azithromycin. So when does he start suspecting anything atypical? For me, 3-year-old child, the pneumonia doesn't respond in 48 hours, it is atypical. So I'm going to start. So what is the bottom line? How do you solve the problem? Very simple. Treating all pneumonias only with azithromycin, even if it is atypical, below the age of 3 years, irrational. Why? Below the age of 3 years, if you use a macrolide, it will not clear the bacteremia. 1. Pneumococcal resistance to macrolide in India, 50 to 75%. Pneumococcal pneumonia is the most common pneumonia in any age group. 2. Chinese studies, 90% of mycoplasma in China are all resistant to macrolides. I am sure in India also it will be the same. So whatever azithromycin we are giving, which we think is doing good for the child with atypical pneumonia, it may be doing good because of the anti-inflammatory activity. So the message is, if you have a child with severe pneumonia, even if it is atypical, do not dare to give only macrolide. There should be a beta-lactam, add macrolide. And how do you add macrolide? Use clinical judgment. How do you use clinical judgment? Any sick patient, anything atypical, add macrolide. Now, the next question is, now levofloxacin is there. Adult pneumonia, the drug of choice is levofloxacin. Why? It covers pneumococcus, covers Staph aureus, covers H. flu, covers chlamydia, legionella, and mycoplasma. Can you use it left and right? There is a study which has come from Bangladesh, equal efficacy with ceftriaxone, but mind you, DCGA doesn't allow you to use, but we do use it occasionally in severe pneumonia, not responding above 8 years of age. This is one of our own cases who had Stevens-Johnson syndrome, who had pneumonia like this, who recorded with IVIG, and we proved it is Stevens-Johnson. This is the first case report of mycoplasma pneumonia causing Stevens-Johnson syndrome in India. Case 4. This is a 2-year-old child, community-acquired pneumonia, amoxicillin for 2 days, worsens, oxygen saturation 86, severe pneumonia. You take an X-ray. What do you find? Pneumococcal, pleural fluid, severe pneumonia. What do you think is the most common organism? Obviously, it is likely to be Staphylococcus. So, the next dilemma for a pediatrician, how do you treat Staphylococcus aureus pneumonia? When do you suspect? When there is a flu epidemic, when a mother has got breast abscess, or a Whitlow, or child has got impetigo, child develops measles and then begins to have pneumonia, there is cellulitis, focus of staph infection, pneumonia is there, suddenly worsening, young infant, think of staph pneumonia. Antibiotics for staph pneumonia, the dilemmas are there for pediatricians. What are the dilemma? What antibiotic do you choose? In fact, I can invite the opinion and I'll get 10 to 15 different answers. And each one will have a rationale for the choice. But what is correct? 1, cloxacillin, all of us know, is the best drug for MSSA. Not available. Oral cloxacillin not available. Only amoxiclox is available or ampiclox is available. Both are irrational. Cefazolin, equally effective in staphylococcal pneumonia, not available. Very difficult to maintain IV line. So what does a pediatrician do? 2, what is the antibiotic? How do you decide whether it is MSSA or MRSA? How long do you give antibiotic? These are the 3 problems we face. Let us see the solutions. One, for a child who appears to have a staphylococcal pneumonia on clinical or radiological judgment, today, with the non-availability of cloxacillin or cefazolin, if you have cloxacillin in use, you can use ceftriaxone alone. But mind you, ceftriaxone is inferior to cloxacillin, inferior to cefazolin. But you can get away with it if it is MSSA. Ceftriaxone will cover MSSA. But you may get away with it better if you use amoxiclav for MSSA, clindamycin for MSSA, or Borsa, borderline resistant Staph aureus. Cefuroxime is inferior, but outpatient treatment, step-down treatment is okay. Cepodoxime is not required for MSSA. But if a child has got Staph aureus pneumonia, and the child happens to have toxic shock syndrome, child is in ICU, you can't take a chance. You have to use 3 drugs. What are the 3 drugs? Cloxacillin, ceftriaxone, clindamycin. It may look like overkill. Why? Cloxacillin to cover MSSA, ceftriaxone to cover other organism, clindamycin for toxin effect. In fact, I may even be tempted to add vancomycin also instead of cloxacillin. I think that I will feel the ceftriaxone should cover MSSA. And mind you, linezolid is emerging as a good choice. Studies have shown it's as good as vancomycin for even bacteremic pneumonia. But throughout the world, the IDSA guidelines also say that vancomycin or teicoplanin is the drug of choice in bacteremic pneumonia. If we have access to cloxacillin injection, we do use them in staphylococcal pneumonia. Ceftriaxone, however good is against penicillin-resistant pneumococcus and H. flu, is certainly inferior to even amoxiclav, inferior to cefadroxil, cefalexin, and even cloxacillin for staphylococcal pneumonia. The problem for us is difficult to prove. Blood culture may not grow. Clindamycin resistance is increasing. People are worried about using clindamycin because of the risk of pseudomembranous colitis. But I'm afraid it's extremely rare. We have not seen even one case in the last 3 years where we have used left and right. Overuse of linezolid, TB experts will be worried. And for all staphylococcal pneumonia, you have to use therapy for 3 to 4 weeks. Last case, 12-year-old adolescent, fever for 4 days, respiratory distress and cough, on ceftriaxone appropriately for severe pneumonia, referred and hospitalized with hypoxia, saturation was 80. And this is the X-ray, bilateral interstitial pneumonia. When we are searching for the diagnosis, we didn't know what to do. Nowadays, when we don't know what to do, we do 2 things. One, we add meropenem vancomycin. We also add doxycycline. Yes or no? That's exactly what we did. We stepped up the antibiotic to meropenem vancomycin, doxycycline. But then, one of my junior-most senior house officer looked at the child and told me, sir, there is an eschar there behind the ear. And we stepped down the antibiotic to only doxycycline. It ultimately turned out to be scrub typhus. Why am I presenting this? There are unusual organisms like typhus, melioidosis, legionella, adeno, PCP, TB, etc. Whenever pneumonia behaves abnormally, in fact, most children who come to us don't read Nelson. They only, like students, read only Google. So they present unusually. So consider all these organisms when the pneumonia is behaving differently from what is described in textbooks. In these conditions, a few agents, if you use them on your suspicion, on your clinical judgment, may save the lives. What are these agents? Doxycycline. It covers mycoplasma, legionella, melioidosis, brucellosis, right? And also scrub typhus. Levofloxacin covers almost everything, all the gram-positive, gram-negative. Meropenem, we know it is the supreme, except scrub typhus, it covers everything. Ceftazidime for Burkhardia, cotrimoxazole for PCP and brucellosis. But you must know how to use them and also try to get lab support. In summary, most community-acquired pneumonias require only ampicillin or amoxicillin. Ceftriaxone is the drug of choice for severe community-acquired pneumonia. Oseltamivir within 24 or 48 hours is beneficial. particularly in reducing the risk of otitis media and shortening the duration of illness. Amoxiclav is the drug of choice in pneumonia, complicating flu and in aspiration pneumonia, not for all pneumonias. Atypical pneumonia, 10 years from now, there won't be any term of atypical pneumonia in textbooks. It will be only described as individual pneumonias under community-acquired pneumonia. Azithromycin as an add-on therapy is essentially a clinical decision. Don't waste your money on testing with PCR, with cultures for mycoplasma, IgM. If you think it is atypical, add azithromycin. Levofloxacin, please consider above 8 years in severe ICU cases with severe pneumonia. Non-availability of cloxacillin, cefazolin, and even penicillin. I think we in the IAP need to take action to make them available and corrected. What about the future? The future is simply this: BioFire, new generation tests. What are the new generation tests? You do an nasopharyngeal PCR, within 2 hours, you get tested for 21 pathogens. Look at the list, all viruses. Only thing is, it's going to cost you a lot. In Chennai, it costs us 12,500 rupees. But mind you, like cell phones, you know, for 12,500 rupees, you can get 10 kits like this in the next 5 years, right? In addition to this, this rapid kit is very, very useful, high technology. The biggest problem is that it has got very high sensitivity. It may show you more than one organism. In our own experience, whenever we have asked for BioFire, it has never said no to us. Only thing it often gives us 2 viruses or 2 bacteria. That's the problem. Sensitivity is better. Specificity is not very good. But then there are 2 other exciting developments which is going to change the entire gamut of treatment of pneumonia. What is that? One is MALDI-TOF MS. What is that? Where you get a matrix-assisted laser desorption ionization time of light mass spectrometry. It's a high technology event. The machine costs only around 2 crores today. It's available in CMC Vellore and All India Insured, where you will be able to get the pathogen and also the sensitivity within 1 hour. For example, you give a sputum, it will tell you in 1 hour it is MRSA, sensitive only to vancomycin. That's the greatest advantage. The FDA has validated it for those specimens which are already culture proven. Non-culture proven, the FDA is not validated. I'm sure it will do it in the next 2 years. It's going to change the entire treatment. We are going to get a diagnosis of pneumonia within 1 hour after admission. Second is sequence-based technology, 16S RNA, again very sensitive. It may pick up bugs which are really not pathogens. These things are going to change the practice of treatment of pneumonia. Thank you very much. In a futuristic way, we would be treating pneumonia with more evidence, more confusion, more expenditure. Ultimately, it is a clinician with the 2 horns who has to correlate all these reports and treat judiciously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that excellent talk. Are there any questions from the audience? Only written questions are permitted. No, I don't think there are. So if there are not many questions, I have one question for you, sir. What is the role for ultrasound in case of pneumonia?
Ultrasound is emerging as a very good alternative to chest X-ray in the diagnosis of pneumonia. Unlike Indians, the whole West is concerned about the hazards of radiation in children. They want to reduce the use of X-ray. There are multiple studies which are available. At the same time, ultrasound is not going to be more sensitive than X-ray or CT, but it's going to be more specific. If the ultrasound does not show fluid, does not show abscess, it nearly rules out pleural effusion and abscess, but the ultrasound does not show consolidation, it doesn't rule out consolidation. It is an emerging technology. The radiologists have to get used to interpreting, so it will take some more time. 5-10 years from now, definitely we will not be doing X-ray for every community-acquired pneumonia. We will be doing only ultrasound.
If there are no more questions, we'll wind up. Myself, Dr. Sudha, and my co-chairman, Dr. Ravindran, thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to chair the session. And a special congrats to Dr. Ananthasivan and Dr. Balasubramanian for their talk. It was a very interesting case discussion from Dr. Ananthasivan. And yes, community-acquired pneumonia needs a lot of input. I thought I expected more questions. Thank you, Dr. Balasubramanian.